All right. Hello. Hello, everyone. Going live here with Adam. Adam Lowenstein. Okay. Here we go. And he should be accepting here. Hi, Adam. How are you?
Hey, Matt. I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, fantastic. Fantastic. It's a Friday night here, and over there, what, Friday morning?
We got Friday afternoon here for the folks in the
Okay.
US. Friday morning,
Yeah,
time to get to work. People on the East Coast just waking up, those on the West Coast in California. So we got pretty much the entire awake globe at the moment.
cool. Yeah. Well, it's definitely great to have you. I first want to say how much I enjoyed your book, Reframe the Day. It's
Thank
like
you.
one of the best books I've read this year. Actually, sorry, the best book I've read this year. I'm not, I'm not joking you there. Very, very serious about that. The way that you write is just so fluid, and also I just love the topic. So I really appreciate the fact that you've written this, and I hope that all the followers out there that are watching right now definitely pick up a copy. So
Well,
maybe,
that means a lot. Thank you, Matt. And I think, as with any creative project that you're working on for a long time, where it's basically just you, head down, I'm sure it's the same kind of thing for you, building a brand, building a profile. All of this stuff takes a lot of work before anybody finally sees it. So to get that kind of feedback means the world pretty much. So thank you.
yeah, and I mean the more eyes that get on this book, I think the bigger difference it will make. So I really hope your book goes global.
I
That
hope so
you.
too. And you have done your part in that, and I really appreciate that. And hopefully the folks who are on today can do so as well.
Yeah, it's also one of those books that I'm going to reread for sure, especially when that physical copy arrives. I'm going to read it.
Yeah, who knows
Yeah,
where in the world that book is at this point. And I know that's been true for some other folks who have ordered it and pre-ordered it, and can only hope that it's slowly making its way, from wherever it's coming from to wherever it's going. And one of my friends sent me an email a few weeks ago with just the hashtag COVID shipping, and I think that pretty much just summed it up at the moment.
it does. It does. So maybe you want to tell a little bit about yourself, and maybe tell a little bit about your book for those people that don't know what it's about. I'll let you put it into your own words.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And so as you mentioned, I'm coming to you live here from London, where I've lived with my partner, Erin, for the past 2.5, 3 years or so. And before we moved here, we were in Washington, D.C. for most of the, 7 or 8 years before that, and working in politics in some form or another, primarily on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C., but also a little bit back in my home state of Colorado. And moving to the UK, finding a job that gave me a little bit more work-life balance, and actually having some time to take a step back and think about, the last 7 or 8 years of my life at that point. I was finding myself experiencing these little moments of fulfillment and contentment, and just feeling very much present and at peace in a way that I never had before. And so, like a lot of writers, I just started jotting down some notes to try to make sense of where these feelings were coming from. And it started out as an iPhone note, and then I thought I might turn it into a series of blog posts. And from there, I just kept writing. And over many, many, many drafts and many iterations and many revisions, that series of explorations and writing to figure out what I was experiencing and to figure out what I think, that became the book that is Reframe the Day. And at its core, and I know we'll get into this a little bit more later on, at its core, Reframe the Day is about building more fulfilling days, not by making any radical changes or moving halfway around the world or giving up the life that you live right now, but it's about just trying to nudge each day in a slightly more fulfilling direction by doing things like carving out time for stillness and building an awareness practice so you're more aware of the thoughts and emotions bombarding you all the time, and thinking more about death and mortality, and trying to prioritize the things and the people who matter to you more than the things that are just burdens and obligations and the stuff we all have to do but trying to reorient it so, the want to do's, as I call them, are just as much of a priority, if not more, than the have to do's. So it's little practices like that, nothing that's going to totally change anyone's life overnight. Nothing that I would call a solution. I would call these all practices, because I'm very much still practicing them myself, and over time, nudging my life in a more fulfilling direction by building more fulfilling days. And that's what this book is about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the lifelong learning journey. And, from when I was listening to you just there, it sounds like the thing that really got you started was like just the act of like writing. Because, taking on of writing a book is quite difficult and time consuming. So that's really, really good to hear your perspective about how your book was pieced together over many years. And I just love how realistic your book is. Like, it's got everything from how you work to how you do your relationship, how you meditate. So the tips are all very, very useful. So thank you very much for sharing a little bit about your own story.
Absolutely. And the reason I took that approach and tried to be very honest about where, the fact that meditation hasn't solved my life, whatever that would mean, or the fact that I'm still struggling with all of these practices. And I wrote a new foreword to the book that accompanied publication, which I posted on Medium a few weeks ago, basically saying I'm still struggling with every single one of these practices. In some ways more than ever, in a way that it's almost in some ways feels like I'm mocking the book by how much I'm coming up short in living the ideas and the practices that I talk about. So the way I see it is that this book is a tool for self-reflection more than it is a solution or self-help or anything like that, because we all have our own lives and we're all trying to live our lives in a more fulfilling way. But there's no right or wrong way to do it necessarily. And I'm very much still learning as I go, just like anybody else. And I'm glad that comes through in the book, because it was really important to me to convey the fact that these are not solutions. I don't have any secrets figured out here.
Yeah. It's not like you're shoving things down people's throat, which sometimes I get a book to where I'm like, oh man, what is this author trying to do? Like, shove something down my throat? No, you're just like saying what's coming to your mind, and that's great. I love that style. Mm-hmm. Very authentic. So yeah, Adam. Actually, I have a very interesting question here for you. That's it's kind of related to your book, kind of. I'm curious what sort of books you read and how often, and actually what role has reading nonfiction books had on your journey up to writing and publishing this book. The reason why I ask that is because, well, BookMattic is all about lifelong learning. It's all about reading. So I'm just curious what role reading has had in your journey. And I know you mention it in your book. You mention about reading in your book. So I thought I'd ask you that question. It's an interesting one.
Yeah, and very relevant to a lot of the folks I know who follow you and who are part of this Bookstagram community. And so I would answer that question on a couple of levels. I think on the most, literal level, so to speak, the book is full of quotations and excerpts from books that have had an impact on me and have helped shape my thinking. And I think that one of the most amazing moments that comes with reading is when you read something that brings into your consciousness something that you might have thought or had an inkling about or maybe wondered about or maybe never really thought about until it was right there in front of you. And then reading what another author has put on paper or put on the digital page brings it to life in your consciousness. And I think that is, for me, part of the reason that reading is such a transformative experience, and part of the reason that I have put so many quotes from different authors who I admire throughout this book, to the point that one of the my friends who read an early version of the manuscript, she said, in some parts it kind of reads like a book report because there's just so much of other people's work in there. And so I had to dial it back a little bit in terms of the amount of quotes and citations I included in the book. But the reason I call this book, again, a tool for self-reflection is because so much of who I am has been shaped not just by my experiences, but about by what the content that I've consumed, the books I've read, the podcasts I've listened to. And not everything that we consume is relevant to our own lives, but I think a lot of the time, you get those great little moments when you hear somebody say something or read something that someone has written, and that really resonates with you, and you shift your life in a slightly different direction because of that. And so that's part of the reason why, the book is full of quotes from, at the start, authors like Cal Newport and Ryan Holiday and David Brooks, and a few others. And then, later on in the book, citing a lot from Ta-Nehisi Coates and Brian Stevenson and a number of other authors who had a big impact on me. And then I think just the act of reading in general, so taking it from the literal level to a slightly more meta level here, the act of reading, especially these days in a very distracted and stressful and uncertain time when information is coming in from all channels all the time, 24/7, reading and focusing on a single text in front of you is a way to dial some of that down and retrain the brain to focus on one single item in a way that's just inherently very fulfilling. And that's part of the reason why I talk in there about wanting to read more fiction, because my reading has primarily focused on nonfiction over the past few years, and that was actually one of my New Year's resolutions this year, is to read fiction, because it sucks you into a different world. It trains a whole different part of your brain. It teaches us empathy and compassion in a way that can certainly come through in some nonfiction, especially biography and that type of writing. But in addition to the nonfiction that's been clearly transformative for me, because I write about it so much in the book, I'm trying to get into the world of fiction a little bit more for those reasons.
Yeah, man. Yeah, for sure. I also read a little bit of fiction myself because it just helps me, like you said, get into another world and just kind of relax, Yeah. Reading nonfiction is a very active activity, whereas reading fiction is very relaxing. We're still getting sucked into the story. But yeah, definitely. And you also mentioned in your book about the part where consuming the different types of information, and we can never consume all the information in the world. I mean, how many books have been written, right? I mean, my full bookshelf here has taken me like 5 years to read just here, and I've got just 185 books or something like that. So obviously we cannot read all the books in the world. We cannot watch all the videos in the world. So maybe what would your tip be for people watching to kind of filter out the unnecessary books or videos, to just like dial down and focus in on a particular topic or something like that? So
that's a great question, because it's something that I'm wrestling with all the time as well. And speaking of things that are a practice that I'm still trying to figure out, that's definitely one of them, because I feel like I can easily spend all the time that I would be reading a book, just reading lists of books that I want to read. And at a certain point, you're either going to read best of year-end book lists, or you're going to read actual books. And so what I try to remind myself is that there's no possible way to read it all. There's no way to consume it all. There's too much out there, both good and bad. And that's just on books. And then you switch over to podcasts and audiobooks and TV shows and documentaries and movies, and there's just too much content. And that's before you consider engaging with other human beings, which is also time well spent. So there's just no way to consume it all. There's no way to consume even all of the best content, whatever that means. And so I try to remind myself of that when I feel overwhelmed with how much content I want to consume. First of all, I try to remind myself that that's an amazing problem to have the resources and the time and the ability, and to have this much good material in front of me. So it's not really something to complain about. And then I also remind myself that there's no way I'll ever get through it all, so I might as well just start with the content that I think I want to read the most. And this comes back to that idea of, instead of prioritizing our have-to-dos over our want-to-dos, which is the way that we often structure our days, at the top, we're spending all of our time doing things that other people ask us to do, or what we feel like we should be doing. and then save what we want to be doing, reading a book or watching a TV show for the last 15 minutes before we go to sleep. Switch those things instead. And instead of, to take it back to the reading question, instead of reading the things we feel like we should be reading, and then, maybe if time allows at the end of the day or the end of the year, we'll read something that actually interests us, flip that. So start with the stuff that you actually want to read, and then just go from there. And that's, again, a work in progress for me. I don't have any answers to it. But that's the mental technique that I've tried to at least be more conscious of as I'm thinking about what I want to read and how I want to spend my time.
Yeah, I really did enjoy that section. And one tip that I would personally have is, especially with reading nonfiction books, is there's always something that we can improve in our life, right? So try to look for that particular nonfiction book that really narrows in on that topic, and read a book about that topic. So I'm always searching for books that are either of interest to me or is going to try and help me solve a problem in my life. So
yeah,
that's what I use for my filter.
I like that. And how do you balance, you mentioned you were dabbling in some fiction as well. How do you balance all the things that you want to read with, and also, the work that you do to bring, what people reach out to you and say, can you share this with the world? How do you balance that with the other books that you just want to read on your own, with maybe fiction or some other genre that you're not used to consuming? How do you juggle those things?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I read 6 books at one time. So I will read two books from authors, because I love doing author promotions. 1, it helps the author. 2, it helps me. And 3, my audience can see the types of books that I'm reading. So I read 2 books at one time for that. And then I'll read a couple books of my own choosing, something that's going to help me out, whether it's a book about, writing, or a book about mindset, or whatever it may be. And then I'll read like a fiction book, maybe 2 fiction books. So I'll read each book for about 10 minutes every day, 10 to 20 minutes every day. So that's about an hour to 2 hours every day worth of reading. And then the rest of the time is balanced out with my family, with working on projects for BookMattic, online course. I just try to balance my day as best as possible by blocking the tips from Deep Work, and also you mention it in your book. Blocking out times of the day. That way I'm not stressing myself out too much, and I'm leaving enough time for something that I really enjoy. Usually after 8 o'clock, I might be like sitting with my family. Maybe I'll watch a movie with them. So it's not all work.
Right.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And it's amazing how much you can get through with 10 or 20 minutes a day on a particular book. It all very much adds up. And in some ways, that's part of the message behind Reframe the Day, which is that you don't need to go from 0 to 60 miles an hour overnight. It's all about just making a little bit of progress today, a little bit of progress tomorrow. If you don't make any progress the day after that, no worries. Give yourself some, cut yourself some slack and pick up again the next day. And it's much more sustainable to do a little bit every day than it is to try to spend 6 hours one day, then you don't read for 2 weeks, and then 7 hours another day.
Yeah, you wouldn't make it very. Yeah, definitely. I really love that, and also this kind of connects with the part in your book that talks about FOMO, the fear of missing out.
It's the worst.
I find myself experience that a lot, especially with social media. Social media is really a killer for that, to have that sense of fear of missing out. Oh, what am I missing? What did my friends post, or whatever it may be. So what would be your solution and your tip to the people watching? And maybe you can explain a little bit about that section of your book.
Yeah, absolutely. And ironic in probably a positive way that we're talking about it on a social media platform, which is probably one of, if not the most FOMO-inducing services or technological services that we all turn to. So in the book, let me take a step back. I have long struggled with the fear of missing out. And the more I've looked back on some of the career and personal decisions I made over the last 10, 12 years of my life, the more I've seen clearly how FOMO has played a role in some of those decisions. And in the book, I tell the story of how I dropped pretty much all of my life in Washington, D.C. to move back to Colorado with a plan to run for the state house, not really because I wanted to do that, but because I thought I would miss out if I didn't do that. And, I could go on for a long time here about my own my own psychoanalysis of my own thinking that led to that. But I think FOMO played a big role in that. And I think it's something that is sort of it's a uniquely powerful force these days for the reason you mentioned, because of social media. But I also think part of it comes from a generation of productivity books and work at all costs, be busy all the time, mantras and ways of thinking that have trained us all to think that if we just figure out the right life hack, or if we just wake up earlier than everybody else, or if we just figure out how to be more productive or to do more things at the same time, then we will get to a point where we can do it all. And until we figure out how to do it all, then we're going to be missing out. And then because of social media and because of all the things we talked about, that becomes kind of a very vicious cycle. And in the book, I pretty much just wrestle out loud with how to tame that feeling, that fear of missing out. Because on one hand, FOMO can be a good thing, because if we don't feel a little bit of fear about missing out, we might never push ourselves out of our comfort zone or try new things or meet new people. On the other hand, if we make every decision in our lives solely because of FOMO and not because, say, we actually have something that we want to do or a goal we want to achieve, something that comes from inside of us and who we are, then that's certainly not going to be a fulfilling way to live one's life, solely making decisions based on being afraid of missing out. And so I call this the Fomo Paradox in the book, because there's really no way to resolve it. So my only conclusion, which is too strong of a word for what I come to, is that FOMO is basically a craving. And like any craving, the best we can do is be aware of it and try to process it and think about it and try to figure out what FOMO is telling us when we feel it. The worst we can do is just be on autopilot, being yanked around by our emotions back and forth and our fears about missing out. And I think the best we can do, which is not very satisfying, but I think it's honest, or at least it's the best I've been able to figure out, is that just to be aware of FOMO and to know it's always lurking, and to try to think about how is FOMO impacting how I'm thinking about this decision that's in front of me right now. That's kind of the best we can do. And that comes back to this question of awareness.
Yeah, it's definitely about awareness, being aware, like you're saying, realize that it's there and realize that, yeah, you could fall into the trap of it. But if you're more aware of it, then there's a way to kind of avoid it. So that was a really good way. Really loved it. And I would definitely like to open up the questions to people watching. But I have one more question for you before we do that. How's that sound? Is that cool?
That sounds great. And yeah, everybody who's watching right now, feel free to drop a question in the comments. And otherwise, Matt and I'll just keep chatting.
Yeah, definitely. Actually, you guys can put it there. We'll be watching out for it. But I'm going to ask Adam one more question now. So that last question here is, at one point in the book, you mentioned that you had 8 jobs. You went for 3 master degrees in about 6+ years. I'm just curious. You did this also while you were married, correct? If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. So between my partner Aaron and me, we had, I think, however many jobs are in the book, and between the two of us during the time of our relationship, we've I think covered 3 master's degrees and moved to a bunch of different places at a bunch of different times. So between the two of us, that was our cumulative tally.
Okay, so between the two, for some reason I thought it was just you, and I was just like, whoa, that's like ridiculously crazy.
Yeah, I'm getting burned out just thinking about it, actually.
But still, that is a lot. And so I'm just curious, how did you keep your wits in your life and in your relationship? Because, for the people out there watching and who are in relationships and married, they know that, if you work too much and you don't spend enough time with your other one, then it's going to create a problem. So I'm just curious how you kept your wits, and what advice do you have for aspiring people who are married or in a relationship striving to accomplish so much?
Yeah, and so let me preface this by saying that I'm probably not qualified to give too much by way of relationship advice, just because I feel like, and this is probably true for all of us, we're just figuring it out as we go. And it's a lot of work and a lot of trial and error. And I think, so one thing let me hone in on that I talk about a little bit in the book is this tension between self-improvement and self-indulgence, because I think this is one thing that I have seen cause a lot of strain on the relationship between Aaron and me, is that I have so many self-improvement related habits and habits in progress and ideas and things that I want to be driving forward in my own life. So I want to meditate every day. I want to read a couple hours every day. I want to write every day. I've got my day job. It's very easy, I have found, in this self-improvement space that we are in, to veer far towards that extreme where we spend all of our time focusing on optimizing ourselves, that we forget that these things have an impact on the people around us too. And I could spend all of my time doing all of these things that I want to do every day because I think it will make me a better person, and I think that's true. But at the same time, if I get irritated because my routines have been they've been interrupted by any number of things, or if I'm spending all my time trying to get in a meditative state or read some really intense book and sacrificing time with my partner to do that, then is that really self-improvement, or is that more self-indulgence? And again, this is a theme in this book. I don't have any clear answers, but I try to be aware of that tension between the two, because it's easy to go too far towards the other extreme. And, it could be a job, it could be a relationship, anything that, requires us to give something of ourselves. We can easily give too much. And I saw this a lot in politics. You see people in, the nonprofit community and the political world who get completely burned out by their work, which has an inherent service aspect that they don't take care of themselves. On the flip side, it's easy to see people who spend all their time optimizing themselves, which in itself is not a bad thing, but it means they sacrifice being there for other people, trying to play a role in their community, volunteering, thinking of serving in some way. So we have to feel these tensions because they keep us from veering too far towards one extreme or the other. So that's the only thing that I would say comes even close to an answer for me, is just trying to be aware of it and trying to balance it and trying to forgive myself when I come up short, and recognize that there are always going to be trade-offs in life, and it comes back to this question of, can we do it all? And the answer is, of course not. Like, there's no way, even if we cut out all the stuff we don't want to do, we can't do all the stuff we do want to do. It's just impossible. So the best we can do is try to cut ourselves some slack and be aware of these tensions and keep pressing forward.
For sure. For sure. I mean, I've experienced the same thing with my, with my marriage too. So I just thought I would ask that because it just amazes me how much work you've done, and you're also almost I think the same age as me. You said you're a millennial too, yeah?
Yep, and that's one of the things that I get into at the start of the book, is the unique world that millennials have come into, which is defined by striving and uncertainty and FOMO and all of these things. It impacts all of us, but I feel like us and our fellow millennials have had a uniquely uncertain world that we've lived our lives in, as we're being reminded again right now.
So true. I mean, it's like we went from the 1980s, transitioning into the internet age. So, I mean, it's a quite crazy time for us, this huge transition. Whereas, kids born in the 2000s, Gen Z, they've already had this stuff since they were born. So, yeah, it's a big change. And, someone here was asking, Mike Johnstone, is actually a question that I wanted to ask too. He says, love the book. Any plans for the next one?
An excellent question from an excellent friend. And yes, but what I haven't figured out is how I can make time for that. And this comes back to actually what we were just talking about not just millennial burnout or burnout in general, but balancing the things we want to do with the fact that we have limited time and limited bandwidth, both in our own days and with the people who we love. And so I've been thinking a lot about where I want to go next with this whole writing thing. And my hope is to get the word out about Reframe the Day as much as I can, because I really think the ideas in here can benefit people the same way that, the people whose work that inspired me to write this book in the first place has benefited me. But I don't know if I'll do anything more in the self-improvement space. I think I want to move into something that requires a little bit more reporting and hopefully something that I can make a full-time gig at some point or another. So to Mike, excellent question. And you'll be one of the first to know when those plans congeal in my mind. I got to give myself some time and space to think about it though, because there's no way I would have written this book if I didn't have time to step back and just be with my own thoughts. And I know from experience that if I don't make that time, then it's not going to happen on its own. And so I got to be able to carve that space out and do some thinking and reflecting and figure out where to go next.
Yeah, Adam, and I think it will be really hard to beat this one because this one is really good.
Well, thank you. That means so much. I really appreciate that.
Yeah. It's your first book too, yes?
This is the first one, and my hope is that some of the learning curve that I have been writing on for the last couple of years about how the publishing world works, I will be very glad not to have to learn that again for the first time, because and that's been part of the journey with this book that's been really fun, is learning about this whole space of publishing. But my hope is that I only need to learn about it this way once, and then can spend more time thinking about the content and ideas and less time trying to figure out, what an ISBN is, that kind of thing.
Yeah, just like anything in life, right? So now you've already learned it.
Yeah.
Now you can do it again, and how to go about doing it. It's just about putting the content together. So yeah, that's very cool. So maybe we can get a few more questions from the people watching. That would be great to get some more questions for Adam about his book, Reframe Today.
And while we're waiting for questions to come in, that made me think of one thing that I think is a challenge with any sort of side hustle or passion project that becomes something more than that, something where you're trying to make money off of it, or something that you're trying to build a platform or a profile through. And, one of my hopes is that I wrote a little bit about this in the book, and I've written about it in the past, is I want to make sure I still see writing not just as something that I love, but see the value in writing, even if not a single other person ever reads what is written. Because just the ability of the written word or the typed word to bring clarity to our own thoughts and help us make sense of the world, like that is incredibly valuable in and of itself. And it's easy for me to get caught up in promoting this book and feeling disappointed if not everyone in the world has read it. It's a constant exercise for me in making sure I don't forget that there was value in just writing it down in the first place. And even if it didn't ever get into print, and even if no one else had ever read it, just the act of writing is incredibly valuable. And like anything else that we can easily lose sight of, and then we try to bring ourselves back to it and remember these important aspects of our lives, that's one that I think is, a work in progress for me, as it is for many people, and especially in the writing world. With all of that said, I do want to promote it and get the word out. So things like this are really fun and really valuable too.
Yeah, definitely. It's I really do appreciate you making the time out of your schedule to come on here and share with the BookMattic lifelong learners. Just sharing your book with the world. It's awesome, you know. We've got people from all around the world watching right now. From India, from Indonesia, where I'm living right now, from America, from England, yeah, from everywhere. So it's cool that all these people are reading your book. Well, at least I hope they read your book.
I hope so too. And if they need another incentive to do so, this seems like a good place for me to mention that all of the profits from all the book sales, originally it was just pre-orders, but then I decided to extend it through the lifetime of this book. All of the profits from sales of this book are going to support charitable causes and organizations. And right now we're supporting Direct Relief, which is doing amazing work around the world. They've always done disaster response and taking on the fight to poverty, and but they're in particular right now focused on getting PPE and other life-saving equipment to hospitals and healthcare workers and other frontline workers around the world. So my hope is that in addition to finding some value in the book itself, people can get a little bit of satisfaction knowing that part of their money that went to pay for this book is going to a good cause, to Direct Relief. So everybody should check out Direct Relief, directrelief.org. They're doing amazing stuff, and folks can stay tuned on my website, my email newsletter, or here on Instagram to find out about how much money we've raised, which I will hopefully know in the next couple of months. So so that's been exciting and very fulfilling too. And my hope is that we can keep raising money by getting the word out about this book.
Definitely. Well, I'll keep on promoting it. It will show up in some stacks, and
Amazing.
Definitely. Yeah, it's a really good cause to be able to donate the proceeds. So we appreciate you doing that.
Well, thank you. And I appreciate you having me on, and we'll continue this conversation. I hope I'm going to get this up on YouTube, and then it'll be on both of our stories for the next 24 hours. And I don't know how to do IGTV, but maybe there's a way to get this on IGTV. Some way to preserve this conversation and keep getting the word out about the book.
Well, my wife should be recording it downstairs. I'll send you a copy.
Amazing. Okay. Amazing. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, there's another question here, actually. You want to answer this one?
Yeah. Excellent question from Rupert and Chris and the gang at Dynamic. What are the most effective mechanisms or habits that you found to split up your days to enable proper focus? I'll try to make this quick because I could go on about this topic for a while. There are 3 concrete suggestions that I give in the book. One is I'm talking here about finding, time to think in moments of stillness. And I tell the story of George Shultz, who was the Secretary of State for the U.S. under Ronald Reagan, and he had what a New York Times columnist called a Shultz hour. So this was 1 hour every week where he would sit in his office with a notepad in front of him, close the door, and he was to be disturbed only if his wife or if his boss, who was the President of the United States, called. And other than that, no one else was to interrupt him during that 1 hour a week. And he carved out that time to make sure, as he called it, that he didn't get pulled into moment-to-moment tactical issues every minute of every day. This was the time where he could actually take a step back and think about strategy and think about the bigger questions, which, in our lives might be, what skill do we want to learn? What aspect of our relationship do we want to work on? What are these thoughts in the back of our minds that we haven't given time or space to come into our consciousness? So we can all find time for a Shultz hour, or what my dad calls a Tuesday to write, or what I talk about in the book is something that Cal Newport, the author of Deep Work, recommends, called a productive meditation. I think the point here is not to do it in a specific way, but rather to convey that it has to be a conscious, intentional effort to make time, not just for what matters to us, but to make time for stillness and to make time to think and to make time to sit down with that notepad or that virtual notepad in front of us and just write down whatever comes in to our minds and just clear out all the nonsense and craziness bouncing around in our brains. I talk about, for me, it's about putting it on my to-do list. It sounds kind of unglamorous, and that I'm treating making time to think or taking a walk as just a task that I'm going to check off. But the to-do list is what I use to manage my, the unpleasantries of life. So I might as well use this system that works for me to make sure I get the important stuff on there as well. So it's about, putting it on your calendar at a set time every week and blocking that time off, and then actually taking the time to do what you said you were going to do, whether it's reading or writing or working on a craft of some sort or a habit or a new skill, putting it on your to-do list and actually using the systems that you use for your day-to-day life for the things that you care about too. And, folks can check out the book for a little bit more detail on those different ideas, but I think the specifics matter less than the fact that whatever you do it intentionally and consciously and proactively, and then follow through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really love that aspect of your book, and I've actually used it in my to-do list. Rather than just putting a bunch of things that you need to do for work, you can also include, like a real example of what I wrote was, spend an hour with my daughter playing around with critical thinking toys. So I actually wrote that in my to-do list, and I actually did it. So by writing it down, it really helps us to actually follow through with what we're doing, and it really doesn't have to be all about work. It can be about the things that we enjoy, the things that we, the people that we love. So yeah, I really appreciate that takeaway, and I've actually used it in my life since I read it in your book. So
That's amazing. And it sounds, I think, to some people when you read that, like you're minimizing or diminishing the importance of something like that, of spending time with your daughter. And the idea is that we should just remember the things that are important to us, because if we don't remember them on our own, then they must not be important to us. But I don't think that's how life works. We all have, we're too busy. We have too many different, channels and streams of information coming in, too many things to do that we need these systems to help us prioritize the stuff that really matters. And it is not a failure to use our systems for the stuff we care about too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very true, very true. 100% agree. It's so worthy using that as a tool. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Adam. You want to say anything else to anyone, or you want to answer any more questions? Or
yeah,
well, let me just we've been on for 40 minutes, 45 minutes.
Oh yeah, excellent. I guess we'll give everybody else a break here and wrap things up. But just one more reminder that all of the profits from sales of Reframe the Day, whether you buy the print book or the electronic version, all the profits are going to direct relief to the coronavirus response efforts, in particular of Direct Relief. They're doing amazing stuff. If you want to learn more about the book, Reframe the Day is the website. You can find out where to buy it. Hope you'll support indie bookstores if you can. You'll find links to some of the other media appearances and other events that I'll be doing, and find out some of my other writing too about politics and life and work and all sorts of stuff that hasn't made it into the book for any number of reasons. So reframetheday.com, and a huge thank you to you, Matt, for the amazing reviews that you've done, for giving it such a thorough and close read. That means a great deal to me, and I appreciate having the chance to have this conversation. It's really, writing is such a solitary endeavor that it's incredibly rewarding when it is actually a means of engaging with other human beings, especially right now. I think that'd be true under normal circumstances, but at a time when we're all locked down and wondering what's going to happen, this kind of conversation is more valuable than ever, I think. So I'm grateful for this opportunity.
Yeah, it's perfect timing to release the book, and the topic of the book is well worth reading. So I second that, and I really hope that everyone watching right now gets the book. Get Reframe the Day. Can you show it one more time? Show it so everyone can see it.
This is what it will look like in your hands in any time between tomorrow and 6 weeks from now when it actually shows up.
Yeah. So definitely get yourself a copy. Thank you very much for joining, Adam, and we will chat soon. And have a fantastic day. Yeah, we'll go ahead and end the
Absolutely.
live.
You too, Matt. Thanks so much for having me on, and thanks everybody for joining.
Yeah, thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for watching. All right, bye.
See ya.